Thanks, everybody, for joining us. I think the invitation said we were going to do a customer case study, so I'm reprising one that I did with WiSys and our customer OMT some time ago, about a year ago, with some fresh applications that we've done. I know that Jake Taylor from OMT is on the phone, but I promised him he wouldn't have to say anything, so I'll do all the talking today. What we're going to touch on is as much of this as we can. It's hard to do a lot in 40 minutes. And the idea here is not to see your business solved in what I'm going to show you, but to kind of understand how we can take a set of circumstances for a specific given situation. And then within the framework of agility and some of the tools that WiSys has developed, wrap a solution around those requirements to meet them specifically, as opposed to the early days of this business when it was, here's our software, and let's see if we can get you to fit into that. So it's quite a bit different in terms of how we've been able to adapt it to specific business issues that our customers require. So we're going to touch on a number of things just to give you kind of a general idea of what the capabilities are. But again, in 40 minutes, we're not going to go very deep. Happy to answer questions either in the Q&A section of this webinar, or you certainly can send me or Zach an email or call us, and we can get a little deeper on some specifics for you. So as we discussed, the case they were looking at is a company called Ohio Metal Technologies. They are a Tier 2 automotive supplier within an hour of Columbus. Our office is here. They implement Macola progression, 2001, and then converted to Macola ES in 2010. That was kind of the beginning step of their business process that was getting that ES. Not necessary for what we're showing today. What we're showing you would work just as well in progression, but they wanted to get over the ES hurdle before we moved on to the manufacturing issues. And all manufacturing issues and progression were controlled outside of Macola with a number of access databases and Excel spreadsheets and manual processes that were not conducive to their growth. And there's a little bit about Ohio Metal Technologies, which I took from their website. You're welcome to visit that. So what I thought I would do today is kind of present what the business issues were, a couple of them, and then within each of them, they're nested some smaller issues, and then talk about how we, within the agility framework from WiSys, solved some of those issues. The first one was that they needed to simplify their receiving inventory processes. Receiving had its own unique challenges. They had their typical vendor-supplied inventory, which uniquely in their business, there's a wall that runs down the middle of the plant. And the left side of that wall from the receiving docks is the aluminum side of the business, and all of the materials that they receive in there are vendor-supplied, typical manufacturing process of receiving against the purchase order and so on. But to the right of that wall is the steel side of their business, and that steel is consigned from their customers. So there's no purchase order receiving, but they need obviously still to bring in the materials. They need to inventory those materials, and they need to issue those materials to the production process. So there were some challenges in that, and very specifically, they had a full-time person almost daily taking inventory manually with a spreadsheet and a clipboard out in the plant to be able to be accountable to their customer for how much steel had been received and consumed and was still on hand. So that reporting process was pretty onerous. They also, because of this need to trace the raw material, aluminum and steel, into the process, they needed to implement lot control, which adds a level of complexity to any manufacturing process in general, and in theirs, it had some specific challenges. So let's talk about a little bit about just that part of it, and then we'll come back to some other business issues. So, what is my screen time now? Okay, what you're looking at is a handheld device on the shop floor. Another thing that they was good data collection wherever that made sense. And we implemented the WiSys Pocket BS, use handhelds to drive those business processes. Some of the business processes, like purchase order receiving that comes out of the box, was something we didn't have to adapt at all. So in terms of just that left side of that wall, if you will, the aluminum of the wall, they just have a standard purchase order receiving process. This device would obviously be scanning in something. Hopefully the receiver is scanned from the vendor. If not, we could have an scannable device, scannable document, get those things. But because for our purposes today, I'm just going to just data or do a look up. So here's a purchase order that we're going to receive against, and you can see there's multiple line items, and this is coming right out of the Macola data. Couple, 5, 6 line items here, and there's a quantity remaining on here of 1,361, and in this case they purchase by the pound, but they inventory by the bar. So we're going to receive in 1,000 pounds. First thing that you'll notice up at the top is because of there are a lot of issues, we need to assign a lot number to this receipt. And we run a nightly process on a SQL server that redefines their lot numbers daily so that we can add some Julian dating, and then every day the lot number resequences to the next Julian date, and that happens in the background. It's not a process that has to be managed. So we are assigning a unique lot number to this receipt. In order to track it back to not only the purchase order but to the vendor, many times they will have their own lot number, or in some cases it's a heat number or some other identifier. So we will enter that into the manufacturer's serial lot number, another Macola field, and then the quantity to receive. And now you notice on the first screen I entered 1,000 pounds, but here we're actually going to receive in bars because that's how we inventory this item. So we receive in 87 bars, and those 87 bars are assigned to that lot number. And on this screen, which would have popped up on the handheld on my desktop, we're printing a label that will go on to this bundle of aluminum that came in the door, because we need then to have it identified internally for issue to manufacturing process. So we can specify a number of labels that we're going to print, and for this purpose I'm just going to print this to a PDF and it'll pop up on my screen. And there is their internally defined finished good label. So this will get hung on to the bundle and allows them then, as part of the manufacturing process, to scan in the serial number that we assigned. So now we have lot trace from the item number and the purchase order and that incoming lot number. So that is typical Macola type receiving functionality done using the handheld device and Agility's Pocket ES tool. That, again, application came right out of the box. We haven't made any changes to that. On the other side of that wall, though, is the process of receiving in steel. And that, obviously, there's no purchase order to receive against. So what we elected to do was use the inventory receiving process out of Macola. But we modified using the form designer inside of Pocket ES to capture data that we needed to capture for this consigned inventory on this steel. First thing that we do is we have a separate stocking location for the steel. It's a consigned inventory location. And this view, when we look this up, sorts out and only looks at that consigned material that is stocked normally in that location. So you see here, just those are the inventory items for steel only, and we don't have to sort through what other items might be in the inventory. If this were, if we were actually scanning this, because again we don't have purchase order documents coming in, that kind of thing, we created a list of all of the inventory items at this consigned location and created a barcode with that, laminated that, and put that on the wall next to the receiving dock where they receive it in the steel. So we could just go ahead and scan that laminated document. But for this purpose, I'll go ahead and do a lookup. And again, a unique lot number created by our background process that runs each night. So the first few digits are significant to the part number, and then this is a Julian dating sequence, and then just a receipt number for the day. Occasionally this information that came in would have, some of the steel would have tags on it, some of the steel would not have tags on it. So we never knew if we were going to be able to scan a document or just key something in. So we created fields where we would be able to enter in the heat and lot information that would be on the shipping documents or maybe on a steel tag or something that's on the bundle. And it gave that as a free form field, and they still actually has a manufacturer lot and a heat number. So I just type in a random number. And we put those in user-defined fields inside the inventory. Some of those, the manufacturing lot number is a standard field. The heat number we put into a user-defined field, so we have the information tracked from the receipt into inventory, and then ultimately on into production. It was important to them that they know how many bundles they receive of this steel, so we can put in a number of bundles. We can put in a weight. And they wanted to be able to standardize on certain lengths, so we put in a field where they could just measure the standard length for that. And because they ultimately need to know how many bars they received, because that's how we're going to produce from bars, we put in a number of bars. And we receive this document. So what this actually will do is just do an inventory transaction into a consigned inventory location for that quantity, no purchase order to match it up to, but allows us then to inventory from there. This also has a tag print routine, but I turned that off since we've already seen that in the other place. But a tag prints off on this as well that they can then hang on the inventory item or the bundle inside the consigned inventory location. So back to the PowerPoint now. So as you saw, we did the inventory receipt on both sides of the equation, and we looked at how lot control, at least on the receipt side, has been implemented. The next thing they wanted to accomplish was just improving inventory counting processes. Not only is inventory difficult most places to take, but when you start adding the complexity of lot numbers, and each of their tubs has a lot number or a serialized label on it, the impact on taking a physical inventory count is a bit onerous. So just to give you an idea of what that looks like out of Agility, one of the things, and for those of you who take inventory count, you'll appreciate this, is this idea inside of progression-oriented ES where you have to create all of your tags, and then you have to go out and take inventory based on those tags and that kind of a thing. And that functionality still exists, but the added functionality that came with Pocket ES is the ability to just create tags on the fly. And one of the things that we're experimenting with here is creating empty batches, not even creating tags at all. So in this case, we've created a batch, and I think I did create this batch with tags in it, but we have the ability to go out and just find a label, and we're going to look up an inventory item here. And we can match it up with a serial lot number that exists. We can scan it with a handheld device if it's on the tub, or in this case, if we just happen to find one on the floor that didn't exist, we can key in a serial number that's on there or scan it. And it tells us that doesn't exist. Now, in normal progression, that's problematic. So inside of what we've done here is you have the ability to confirm that that is, in fact, a lot number we found that wasn't in inventory, and create a quantity for that, and put something in there like that. What that's going to allow us to do is actually create inventory tags without having the tag itself in existence. So that wrote to the same tag file. I was going to show that report, but for sake of time I won't, but it writes it to the same tag file. It adds it to the tagged quantities of lots and quantities that were found. The variance process is the same. The costing is carried forward the same. And ultimately then the ability to post that tag with the other tags is part of that batch. So that eases inventory process quite a bit. And even if we didn't find a tag without a quantity or that didn't exist before, we at least have this quicker methodology to just start scanning the tags that were put onto inventory through the receiving process or the manufacturing process. So back to the PowerPoint. That was the inventory counting process. Next business issue was the way they do manufacturing. And for many of you who are running production order processing, in their particular case they weren't running manufacturing at all. In the initial stages we thought perhaps this was going to be an interim step to shop floor control. We think perhaps most likely that won't be necessary based on some of the things we're going to talk about that we've done with production order processing. One of the issues is that they manufacture based on a customer order and a schedule, and then based on that demand they start issuing bundles to the manufacturing process. The production order processing methodology that requires you to put in an order and a quantity and try and shoot for that quantity really doesn't fit their business model. If they need 1,000 pieces and a bundle will make 5,000 pieces, they're going to run that bundle for the most part. So they wanted to be able to go out and just issue a bundle of steel or aluminum for their manufacturing process, issue it as it's used, no more back flushing, and overproduce or underproduce based on what they have available to them on the shop floor. That was a very important component. And the idea of multiple pop orders and multiple quantities to produce versus what they had available in the bundles was not something they wanted to do. They also, after they pull these very large bundles up and put them in a rack and start manufacturing, and we've issued that whole bundle to the production order, occasionally they'll find a bar that was bent that's in that batch, and their process before was to sort the batch out, stop the process, put some good pieces in. It was a bit of an onerous process. So we wanted to just go ahead and issue the bundle to production, and then as we found bent bars, we can return those to stock and deal with the reason for those bent bars, whether it's bent or not, after the fact. They also wanted the ability to capture labor, not only who and how long they worked on something and how many pieces they produced, but what machine they worked on because of their need to trace back to maybe a quality issue to a certain machine and a certain person. So we wanted to be able to capture that. They were doing some of this inside of the Access databases with a lot of data entry. And then we talked about lot control on the receipt side. There is also obviously the lot control issue through production, the issue of raw materials to production, the production of those parts, and ultimately to the customer. So we had to figure out how to manage those issues. So let's go back over and look at some more software. So on the handheld again, on the POP tab, we've created a couple of functions that come into play on the manufacturing side. The first two are out-of-the-box WiSys functions for issuing of raw material. And in this particular case, we look up an order, or if we have that order in our hand, we can issue it to the order by scanning it. We'll look at that in a little bit. But in this particular order, it knows what the parent item is that we're going to produce. It knows what raw materials are necessary at this particular sequence, where we're going to pull that raw material from, how much is planned, how much has been issued to date, and how much is still left to be issued. And so in this case, we're going to issue another 125 bars to this production order. Because we want to now track that raw material issue from the bar stock into the production process, we have to determine what bar we pulled, what batch we pulled that from. Now, I just issued 125, and you notice all of my lot numbers here are less than that. So we're going to go ahead and issue 92 out of this lot. And then they picked up another bundle, and we're going to issue a partial out of that lot of 33. So we can mix and match that if we need to. So now we've just traced from the raw material receipt process and the vendor identifiers into the production identifiers. The bent bar process, which is this pop return, what we've done, well, the process we've implemented here is that if they find a bar in that batch that needs to be returned to a holding area for whatever reason, that we can use this pop return function to go into the same production order and the bars that have been issued and actually return to stock maybe 12 bent bars. In this case, it's going to require us to write them right back to the same lot number. If we choose the wrong lot number here, it will actually reject that. And so we have to add it back to the right lot number so that we have the ability to trace that back to the origin. And then once that's been returned back to the lot, then they can move that into a material review location or ultimately back to the vendor, something like that. So that was the bent bar process, just real quickly, that they needed to accomplish. So then the next thing we're going to talk about is the production process that we engineered here. And so I'm going to leave the handheld for a minute, and we're going to just enter into agility. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about agility. We've done a sequence of webinars on this. If you need more definition on what it is in general, we can certainly answer those questions. But specific to what we did with Ohio Metal is we used agility to create certain views and queries and actionable grids to accomplish their manufacturing process. So what you see on the left side here is a series of menu selections that we created to support the production process of OMT. Some of these are meant to mimic the handhelds. For instance, if something happens with a handheld and we still need to get the data in, and someone needs to write that data in, we've created some of the input screens for just data entry purposes. So there's the same lookups, same kind of information that we're going to capture on the production side. So there's a number of ways to create new transactions or new inputs. The other thing that we wanted to be able to do was use as much of the Macola tables as possible. There were some things that were necessary for us to create additional SQL tables to support the manufacturing process. But wherever possible, we use standard Macola processes to do that. So their manufacturing employees, for instance, is this view you have here. This is a view into the Macola manufacturing employee table. So we didn't recreate anything here. We just made it available inside this production process so that people could see it. There will be another couple of views we'll look at in a bit that mix Macola tables and our SQL table, our custom tables, to support the process, but it's seamless to the user and makes reporting a lot easier. We'll talk about that in a little bit. So we looked down through a couple of these menu selections. We've created a number of views that we'll talk about. One is, this is actually an out-of-the-box view from WiSys of what these production orders are that are in the system. And so this is a simple query of all production orders. We have the ability to go in and filter. For instance, we could look at listings. We could filter it on dates, customers, whatever's in the grid. We have the ability to look at that. So this is a list of open production orders. Along the other views that we have here are those items or orders that are available to ship. We created a work in process view. One of the complaints we hear a lot about production order processing is, how do I get a handle on what my open work in process valuation is? So we created a work in process view that goes through their manufacturing process and captures data that we're going to look at here in a bit into a view that we can report on. We needed the ability to do certain things like reprint barcode items. We wanted to be able to print scrap code, barcodes, so we could hang those on machines and scan those, the machine identifiers, the tool identifiers, up to and including employee badges. So each of those manufacturing employees, we created a barcode routine that we could go out and reprint badges that can be laminated and an employee can use, or hung on a machinery, or in a book. This view, I think they put into a book. The other thing that we needed to create was the ability to do some reprinting. Occasionally there are printing problems, Wi-Fi over the plant, printer jams, all of those things that we all experience on the shop floor. So we needed the ability to go out and say, hey, the label that's part of the process of receiving or production didn't print. I need to get one because I need to hang that on the tub or on the bundle. So we created reprint processes that will go out and allow us to do that. So this gives us the opportunity to talk about an execution grid. The other view that we looked at was simply a query or a list with some filters. This one gives us the ability to go out and actually choose orders, which we could still filter on, but that had that problem. So if this were the order that I was producing and the printer jammed and I need to reprint that, we can go through and check all the ones that produced. And that label that should have come out as part of the manufacturing process, we can reprint. We can hang that on the tub, and then the process can continue on through manufacturing process. That is a little view of the menu along the left-hand side. So the next what we want to talk about a little bit is the manufacturing process itself. So we created on the screen, on the handhelds for them, the ability to capture production data that made sense to them. And we created a view on the handheld that would allow them to scan the pieces of information that they needed it to filter. So the first thing that we do, though, is that they needed a document that would move through the plant with a production order. So we created another execution grid that is, again, open production orders, which we could filter down as we need to. And then you can use this even as a scheduling device if you need to. For instance, we want to produce this part. We know we want to produce that, and we want it, all the ones that are due, we'll say 5/20 something. And that's a contain, so you see some 5/2s out here. But we want to produce these two orders. So we created an execution grid that allows us to run these two orders, and we created a crystal report to mimic the travel document that they wanted to include in the production process. So we choose the orders that we want to produce, and then we say print traveler. And this process will go through those two orders, and we'll call a crystal report, and we'll barcode those operations. So we'll see that in a moment. Sometimes my crystal engine isn't exactly sizzling fast on my laptop. Well, we'll let that go on, and we'll see that in a minute. So what that's going to produce is a crystal report with the barcoded operations that we can scan. In this particular case, we would have scanned an order number 17006, which is the one that we were trying to print there. Just type. There we go. So 17006 is the item that the order we're going to produce. It knows what the item is. And now we start scanning in some of these other pieces of information, like that employee ID badge that we showed you before. In this case, I'm just going to type it. And it knows who I am, brings up name. And then on this traveler is the barcoded operation. So I'm going to work at operation number 10. One of the things that was important to them was to understand what machine the employee was working on for quality purposes. And we could look that up. Or we could, it's a scanned tag on the machine. In this case, we're going to enter 40 pieces. This view requires that we look up the raw material bundle that was issued to this job. And so we're going to select that, and we're going to save that. So that was operation 10. The operation moves down the line through operations 20 and so on. And there's my crystal. So now you can see what that traveler looks like. So this is the manufacturing traveler that moves with the tub. They wanted to create it in duplicate so they could make copies of it because they make 40 tubs of this at a time. So they would be able to put this in a copier and print 20 of these off and cut them in half, and they would have a sufficient number based on the standard, it's 40 per tub. The standard pack tells them that they can get 17 tubs. So they would make 17 or 20 of these travelers and put them in an envelope and send them out to the plant. Operation 10 that we just entered is barcoded. 20, 30, and 40 at this juncture in their process, they're just doing manually. And then Operation 50, we barcoded as well. Then we put in some filler here that if something should happen, again, wireless is down, gun problems, that they could at least manually write that information in. We can use those screens we created for data entry. So that's one of those orders, and if we close this out, the second order will pop up. So there are the two orders that we chose to produce today. So that was Operation 10 that we reported. The order moves down the line to the next person on the job who scans in. He scans in his employee number. We'll just use the same one. But he's at Operation 50. And Operation 50 is flagged as a finished good operation inside the system. So where the first operation was simply a reporting mechanism to report time and pieces, Operation 50 is flagged to create finished goods. So this is going to create a reduction in work in process and an increase in finished goods at this operation. And different than the first screen, because we're putting something into finished goods, it's creating a lot number for that finished good item. So we know that we're going to create 40 of these. It's going to put that lot number in. We're going to call it 125 pounds. And at this point, we're also going to report some scrap. This was another thing they wanted to identify was scrap in line with the process. It was something that they were doing, again, manually. So they wanted to identify how much was scrap and at what point in the process who was doing the work when that happened. So we created a button on the production screen that should I need to report some scrap, I can fill in the order I'm working on in the operation, but it will also jump out here and say that I created 10 scrap pieces. And we wanted to use Macola wherever we could, so we used a lookup to the Macola scrap code tables, to return scrap codes. So in this particular case, we'll blame it on the tooling, and we'll save that. And because this is a finished good operation, it's actually going to print out a finished good barcode label that we're going to put on that tub and move it into finished goods storage. So this is a very simple label for our production process. This would go onto the tub, has the item or order number it was created on and the date, the raw material or the finished good part number, our internally created lot number, and the quantity that's in that tub. And that goes on into finished goods waiting for the shipping process. The other thing then that I wanted to show you with that was, I might have to refresh the screen. (17.06) is the order we're working on. So this is a view of open orders. But this is one of our custom tables that we joined with some Macola data to create a production view. And in this particular case, we see the two transactions here at the end that we just created a few moments ago. Operation 10, 40 pieces, who the employee was, and on down through the line. And then Operation 50, 40 pieces. Here are the 10 that were scrapped and the reason that they were scrapped. Who the employee was that was working on them. Had we wanted to, we could have forced the machine or the tool identifier. And then there's the raw material, the finished good lot number that went into inventory to produce that item. One thing that we are in the process of working with this application on, originally we had a field on the screen for elapsed time for labor hours, and that just caused a little too much user issue. So for now what we're doing is we're actually using scan times and the difference between scan times to calculate labor time on that operation. So that's something that's still a bit of a process of change for us. So one more, and then we'll maybe take some questions because I think time's running short, is now that we've received and we've issued and produced and put into finished goods, is the shipping process and the billing and that type of process. So I'm not going to go through the shipping issue per se where we're scanning labels into finished goods or into a shipment, but we do want to talk about, just real quickly, the back end of the process, which is the confirm ship process and how that works inside of Agility. One of the things that we've done with a couple of people, OMT does a confirm ship and then a bill, or ship and then a bill and then an invoice process. We've had another customer who wanted all of those three things to be done with one menu click. And then we had one recently who said, well, I want to do the confirm ship and I want to do the bill, but I want the accounting people to print the invoices. I just feel better about that. So they're just different processes there that we can create as much or as little of that as is necessary by stringing together operations and putting them behind executable buttons on grids like this. So for instance, in this particular case, we want to do the shipping and billing function. A lot of people find this to be a kind of an onerous process where you bill, or you confirm ship, and then you bill, and then you invoice. So we can automate this as much as we need to. In this particular case, we're just going to go ahead and issue or bill 40 of these. And we're going to look up the lot number that we want to use because we have to issue a specific lot number. And here are all the lots that we've created through the production process. And we should see one here that we've created today. So you see all the lots that are available to us to ship. And we can pick one to do. We have one little issue on my demo system that's different than theirs, is that the lot number is padded with spaces. So I actually have to type this in. So just a moment on that. So now what we've said is we're going to ship on this order 40 pieces. Here's the lot number we're shipping. And this is that inside of Macola billing process. And we're just going to go ahead and confirm ship those pieces. And that's that process. Now, that was a one-off, no big deal. You could do that inside of Macola. But if you had 30 orders to ship today, and you could simply highlight your entire grid and check them all, go down through and fill quantities and say confirm ship, simplifies the process quite a bit. After we've done that confirm ship process, there's the billing process. We're going to jump over here under order processing. And that was this process. Oh, I'm sorry, this one. Now we're going to do the billing process. There's the order we just confirmed shipped. We can add freight, miscellaneous items. And in this particular one, I think we've chained together the invoice printing. So here we're going to do the billing, and it's going to ask us if we want, like I said, one customer wanted us to do both, one customer wanted us to separate these. So we're just going to go ahead and say yes for ease right now. So we've confirmed shipped, billed, and now we're actually invoicing these 40 pieces with that lot number. So we've kind of closed the loop on confirmed shipping, billing, picking, shipping, and the lot traceability from the bundle that was received in from the customer or the vendor all the way through finished goods so that we have those traceabilities on the back end. So I think I'm a bit over my time, so I'm going to stop and see if Zach has any questions that we can answer.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Just a reminder to everyone, if you have questions, there's a chat button in your WebEx toolbar. You can click on that, and it'll bring up a window, and you can type in your question, hit send, and we'll make sure that it gets to Mike. While they're doing that, Mike, there was a general question about what agility is versus WiSys. Could you just maybe give a high-level overview of what
sure.
the agility dashboard is in?
Yeah, I can do all of that. Actually, I know a couple of my friends from WiSys Ron. Could have let them do that. But WiSys is a company started by a friend of mine, Bruce Hollinger, who was the original founder of Macola. And I like to joke around with him that once he was able to sell Macola to Exact, he was able to go out and form WiSys to fix all the things that we wished he had fixed when he ran Macola. So he's able to fill in a lot of things that over the years we wished, even myself as a user, had inside of Macola in the early days with some current tool. Within the suite of products, with products, kind of break into three areas for me. There is the warehouse management piece, the scanning inventory, the scanning or the taking of physical inventory, the shipping process, putting it on a truck, and so on. That was kind of how they got their start. Then they moved into business objects. Those are things that mimic Macola business processes. For instance, when you enter a sales order right now manually, there's a lot of things that go on in the background. You enter the order, you pick an item, it does an allocation, it puts a quantity on order, it does a number of things through the system. In order for us to do some of the things that we're doing today, we have to mimic those business processes. So they created business objects, which are programming tools, if you will, to mimic those processes that you do every day inside of Macola. The third is the agility framework, which is what we just went through with the grids and those types of things. The ability to do queries and dashboards and reports and all those things inside of the agility framework. But then the executable grids that I showed you take those queries and deliver to you a screen of information that you asked for, but then allows you to, by checking the boxes and doing some configuring with the buttons, behind those buttons, link in these business process objects. So that gives me the ability, for instance, in the agility grid to pull up all the orders that have been billed and highlight the ones through the grid that I want to invoice, click a button and call this business object that does the invoicing process. And what that did was printed the invoice, posted the invoice, all those things, 4 or 5 menu clicks per order that you would do inside of Macola. So those are kind of how the 3 product suites inside of WiSys differentiate themselves. And then I know Bruce and Michael were signed up to listen in today, so you guys can critique that and email that to me if I missed that. But that's how I see the products breaking out.
Okay. And this is a...
You know what? I was going to say, well, people maybe are sending in a couple more questions. Let me just, I had one more screen I forgot, so I just want to summarize with business issues that we'd solved, again, using some of the framework and the tools that we talked about. Their ability to track inventory consignment and then report back to the customer, which was an owner's task. Lot trace from the vendor and the customer receipts all the way through finished goods inventory and ultimately to the shipment to the customer and ultimately to the vehicle identification number on the cars. Well, we looked at the manufacturing data that we were capturing in a POP scenario, which is really unique because if you're running POP right now and you can probably understand the ability to have detailed manufacturing data is pretty hard to come by. We've been able to use tools to accomplish that. Inline scrap reporting, which again, very difficult, especially in a POP environment, not so much in a shop floor, but very difficult in POP. And to meet their business needs, we drove production by bundles and schedules, not work orders, and we were able to accomplish the bent bars. So we are able to issue the materials as we need to along the process. We don't have that back and forth backflushing issue that POP demands. So those are the business issues that we try to accomplish and I tried to address a little bit today.